Hello everyone and welcome to Factorio. This is Rakkfalen, and today I have a new set of blueprints for you. Some of you may have seen my older video with the blueprint book of train blueprints, and I decided that it wasn't quite big enough. So I built a new set of blueprints that are a little bit bigger. You can see this particular junction doesn't even fit on the screen all the way when I zoom all the way out. So let's just kind of go over what I've included in this blueprint pack. First off, you've got your straight rail, and it's got all of the solar panels and accumulators needed to be the correct ratio. I've measured all of these individual blueprints, and they're all really close, like within 0.1, so within 10%. And they're all set up to be 4 242 trains long. Obviously, there's some differences there because, you know, corners are gonna cut it down a little bit, but I used this length as a basis. So we've got our straight. I've also built a straight here with two different walking paths so that you can cross it easily. And you can see when I'm standing on one of these rails, the signal turns red, and this signal back here turns red as well. So that way the trains will stop. But they'll only stop on this line. You can see this one still has a green, but then if I move down here, this one's red and this one's green. So each individual track has its own separate set of signals, so that you're only stopping one train at a time. So going on, we have a curve here. I haven't done any diagonals with this set just because I don't tend to use diagonals. I like to make my builds a little bit more cubic, you know, in different blocks. So I've just done a curve here, which can be used in any direction because it's symmetrical. You can add in diagonals if you'd prefer. Down here we've got a T-Junction, so rather than the big four-way that I was standing in when we started, this is just a three-way junction, which is basically one half of a straight connected to one half of a straight connected to one half of a straight, so it's still the same size. And I did want to mention really quick while I'm standing here that all of these have a roboport on the end that overlaps. So when you go to place down a new blueprint, let me just grab one here. When you go to place down a new blueprint, you basically just line it up so that that roboport overlaps, and it'll connect in perfectly. That will connect the power lines, and it'll also connect the roboport lines. So after this three-way, I've also got a 4-to-2 exit, so you've got your main four-way here, and then this will let trains on and off onto a side line, so like a two-lane. And with the two-lane, I've also included stackers for your 242s. They can go left or can go right, and a stacker exit, so you can see you would come in on this line, and these stops are optional. If you want to use them for like a pre-stop, you can put them in there. Otherwise, you can just remove them from the blueprint. And then once the train is done, it comes out on this line, which is a little bit longer, so that it connects into here. And the left one is the same but opposite, so they'd come in this way and then come back out that way. I've also included two of these smart stops that I've built, and I'll go over those more in a little bit. Basically what this would allow for is you can send a coal train or a rocket fuel train or whatever kind of fuel you want to use to every stop, and it would refill just these chests with fuel, and then any train that's not carrying fuel, it would just unload or load, depending on what direction you have these arms or these pumps going. So we can go over that more down here. I've set up a little example. So you can see here this train has iron ore, and each of the engines here has one coal in it, which isn't going to last very long. So I've set up this stop where it's going to just take out everything that it has, and it's already got a little bit of coal in the stop, so we'll at least give that train a little bit of fuel. So we'll send him down here. The smart stop looks at what it has and goes, that's not fuel. And so it unloads it, and it loads coal in because it sees that there is not fuel in that train. And that train will go back to reload. And then we have this train. And this train is set up backwards. So you've got your coal or your rails on the outer ends and the main train in the middle, and it looks and says, oh, this one has coal. So it turns off these arms so that it doesn't unload the train itself, and it starts taking coal out without putting it back in. So this one will automatically refill and empty into the correct trains depending on what kind of ore it's carrying, or what kind of load it's carrying, sorry. And you can always add more to these. I've got wood, coal, solid fuel, and rocket fuel here. If you need to add a new one, you can just plop another one of these down, and you can pretty much just copy this over and say if, for example, you want to use wooden power poles as your fuel. You say if wooden power poles is greater than 0, then output F. And F needs to just be 1, because all of these arms are told that if signal is F, they either need to turn on or off based on that signal. So, just as a little demonstration, I set up a small little base here, and you can see I've got all the radar turned on, so you can see the logistics networks, the electric networks, and the radar, or the, not radar, turret coverage, and it's all pretty symmetrical and looks good. So let's look at that without really quick. And you can also see the trains going through the junction here. It's got a nice functionality for straight and turns at the same time, so that there's not trains crossing in the middle when they try to take a turn. So over here I've got my coal station, and like I said, it's set up backwards. So for example, if I send this coal train in here to fill, it's got a couple of lines here to feed the coal trains themselves, and then it fills the chests, or the wagons on the outer edges. And this is using a modified version of the stacker that I built before. And then we've got our junction here to go from a 4-lane down to a 2-lane. We can come down here around the corner. And we've got another junction. I don't know that I left any place for me to get in. Hang on a second. Ah, here it is. I made the crossing at the top. So we can go across here to the inside. And I've set up some of these stops not quite the way I would recommend doing it. So this one, you can see I've got a stacker that comes in here to this stop where you can pick up your copper ore, and then you've got the exit rail here. I would not actually recommend putting them this close together. You can put more than one on a line, but there needs to be probably one train length between the left and the right here, just because I've had some issues with trains being on this same set of rails at the same time. Also, if you want to run this rail through, you do need to put in all these extra chain signals, because that's not built in, because it wasn't built to have rails going across the middle of it like that. And down here you can see an example of the smart stop again. It's only loading and unloading if it's supposed to, so the coal will be separate. And then we can come over here really quick and see a functioning example of the center, maybe. Let's use map view. That's going to give us more of a direct view of the center. So you've got your straight rails across. If you want to turn right, you just go on these edges like that train just did. And if you want to turn left, you go across here. I have a couple extra signals in this one that are not in the blueprint. You can see right here, I've actually got some regular rail signals, which is not necessarily recommended, because that way the train ends up stopping in the middle of the intersection if it needs to stop in this section somewhere. But having these in here allows more than one train in this block at a time, because splitting it here means that any trains that are turning left see these as separate quadrants. So now this intersection is 4 quadrants rather than just being one intersection. So trains can enter the intersection and not necessarily have to stop for other trains, just because they're in the intersection, because they don't see it as crossing, because it's a separate block. So that pretty much covers it. I did want to show you really quick that in this blueprint book there is also a couple of alignment tools, and the purpose for this is when I was building these, let me just grab a straight one here. There we go. when you plop down a straight, and then you go to put another one on the end, you can't actually see the end of the blueprint, and I'm all the way zoomed out, so it's hard to get it to line up. So I included these alignment tools so that you can drop that down, and then when you go to put a straight in, you can line it up correctly, and you can kind of see the roboport on the very, very top edge of the screen, and as you get closer, the roboport should turn blue when it's overlapping. There it is, and it'll go red if you get too far. You can see right there, it overlaps just right. So there is a alignment tool to help you with the straights. There's also an alignment tool for the big junction as well, just because that one is also hard to line up because it's so big. So again, when you put that down, you can grab your 4-way junction, and you can just barely see that roboport at the top. You can get the rails lined up, and it'll show you that's exactly where it's supposed to match. So when everything turns blue, that means it's lined up correctly. So that's pretty much it. Again, these have the correct ratios for accumulators and solar panels, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. The turrets are built in, but you can remove them if you don't really want the defenses along the lines, but I find it helps, especially when you're playing Death Worlds. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys all again soon.